Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Sedaru Live. This week we have a very special, exciting session for you today. This is another one of our utility showcases where we highlight the experience of a utility and their journey on their path to a self-driving utility utilizing Sedaru. Today we have Phelan Piñon Hills Community Services District to join us, and we're really excited to get going here. So let's go ahead and move on. So typically when we get to this point in the webinar, we show you guys our drops utility automation path. What we're talking about here usually is where the session we're covering today fits on this continuum, starting from paper based utilities of today all the way to the left, all the way to the self-driving path of the future. But today with the utility showcase, we're not really targeting just one area. We're really talking about the journey that a utility goes through with Sedaru as they try and enhance their use of GIS and asset management and all the different things that we can help you guys with. So today we're going to be doing a little bit more of a path, and excited to share that with you. So the agenda for today, we're really going to go ahead and start off in general with just kind of giving you guys an introduction to Phelan. What help you a little bit understand the utility, what their needs are, sort of what their existence is for, and what they do as an organization. And then really all the next couple items on the agenda really could talk about the history of water production, the history of hydrant valves, the history of Sedaru modeling. So we're going to talk about different aspects of the different pieces of software and services they've utilized from Sedaru, and talk a little bit about where they started, where they got to, and so what their next steps would be. So really excited for this. So I'm going to give you just a real brief introduction. Today I have Jamie Persino. He's our Director of Customer Success here at Sedaru. He's been here for a little over 6 years. About half that time was spent on the services side, and as you'll see during the webinar today, he has worked with Phelan over the course of their time utilizing Sedaru. And really our special guest, no offense Jamie, but is George Cardenas. He is the engineering manager at Phelan, and he's been there since about 2009. So just a little bit of background, their organization was founded in 2008. And so George joined them about a year into the existence of the organization, and he's been the engineering manager since. His focus is really on GIS and GIS use in the field across the organization, and he's been a big part of the growth and the transformation of GIS usage and their integration with Sedaru at Phelan. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you guys. Jamie, you want to go ahead and say a little hi, and then we'll get going?
Certainly. Thank you, Dylan. So kind of as Dylan shared there, we're going to recount the partnership we've built over the years with Phelan, and we're going to go through their journey to date. And as we kind of go through each project and product, we're going to look at their reason for adoption, the functionality that they have, the benefits that they gained, and maybe some stories along the way as well. So I'd like to welcome George with us as well. I've had the pleasure of working with him for a long time. He's a Sedaru early adopter, and he's got some nice stories for you today. So, George, if you would introduce yourself a bit and introduce us to Phelan Piñon Hills.
Will do. Well, thank you for having us. It's a pleasure to kind of showcase Phelan Piñon Hills to the community of mobile applications and GIS. A little bit about myself. I was brought on in 2009 to kind of take over the files and boxes and everything else that was handed over to the CSD from county special districts. The district was formerly special districts in San Bernardino County. The community here voted to be its own entity. So that's how the district was formed. It was by a vote, and the district was formed. We're located in the high desert of California on the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains. The elevation out here is, in our district, is in the 4,300 to 3,400. So high desert up against the foothills. The area is peppered with Joshua trees. It's a desert getaway, and we also are on the boundary of LA County to the west of us. So enjoy the area. I've been up here for quite a bit. So then living down in LA County or down in the basin, it's a nice change of life up here. As you see, we have miles and miles of pipe. Our district is 1,818 square miles with 6,800 connections. We're a big, small district, if that makes sense. We're big in size, but very small in the number of connections that we have here. The system was built between 1978 and 84 through 6 assessment districts. And predominantly they were all AC pipe back then. And since then we've grown, or the area has grown. But like I mentioned, the CSD was given the task to take all this information and do something with it. Information that had been stored in boxes for decades, I can say. Let's just say back from 84 to, from 78 to 84.
George, I think you've shared with me in the past that most of your mains were built within a 5 or 10 year period. Is that accurate?
Majority of them within 5-6 years, yes.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. The other thing that grabs my attention here is the annual rainfall. You know, I grew up in the Midwest. We get 40 inches of rain a year, so it's always interesting for me to get to work with the different utilities out there and all the different issues that they encounter and help you kind of work through those.
Yeah,
so,
one thing I want to add, predominantly we pump all of our water from a basin. We have 2 basins out here, the Oeste and Alto Basin, and they're naturally recharged with snow melt from the San Gabriel Mountains. Not one drop has been purchased from State Water Project, even though the aqueduct crosses our district. You know, someday in the future when we find a need, considering the drought conditions, we may end up recharging our basin with state water or surface water, you want to call that.
Yeah, that's really cool. So if we kind of look at the partnership we've built and kind of where it began, it was when you took over the district there, and you guys had some things that you wanted to improve for sure. You know, everybody wants to save time and reduce paper, but you wanted to do a little bit more than that. You know, you wanted to take control of your system, and you wanted to do that electronically. You wanted to have the data to back up your daily decisions. Can you share some of maybe the issues leading up to that, but also the drivers that led you to a solution like Sedaru?
Well,
and I'll just add real quick here, George, like at the bottom, like a few years ago, you shared that one source of truth, and I really like that. So if you kind of maybe expound on that a little bit as well.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it was an easy decision, especially starting from ground zero, where you're just given all these paper data, is to put that into a database data file. So we started with that initially. So right off the bat, I mean, a lot of what we've received was, well, what are we going to do with this information? So obviously, we wanted to cut paper out of this whole process and somehow get that data collected into an application where we can access the data quickly and when we need to, and do something with the data. You know, we find that most of the time that or back in the day, you would just store all that data in file cabinets. And what do you do with that? Some may claim, well, you know, there's not much we can do. We monitor the system visually and that data is collected. Well, why do we do that? Well, we got to do something with that. And that was the mindset. I came to the district with the background of technology and base maps and GIS and anything water related. So my mindset was already set on doing something to kind of bring everything together and broadcast it, not even internally, but externally to our field staff. So one of the things was to become more efficient with time spent. I mean, our guys on the field would access as-built through paper plans. You know, they would have rolls of plans in the back of their truck and just accessing all their plans that way. And we needed to find a way to kind of automate that. And then as well as collect the data. And collecting the data, and whether it's logging, valve turning, whatever that is, the field operation, daily operations are, we needed a source to bring that information together and then do something with it. There was no more going to a file cabinet to pull data log or efficiencies or groundwater static elevations and things like that. It was all just one location. And Sedaru gave us that opportunity to bring it all in one. So really that's kind of where we were going. And we made a decision to kind of move forward with Sedaru, not just for the ability, there were other options out there, but not just for the ability to bring it onto a tablet, but just for the easy use of our field staff, not that all are all technical savvy. So it was a decision that we made back in 2012, 2013, when we brought it live.
Yeah, and you certainly had some old school users, and maybe still do in some ways. Here's a look at that timeline, George. So thank you for sharing that. As you alluded to a moment ago, that original project is really around collecting data in the field. We have the modeling app in there as well, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But you really kind of hit the ground running on the field force side and around your production reports or production data. We circled back and created reports for the data you were collecting in 15, integrated Incode in 16, and just kept on going. That looking back on that evolution now is certainly special, and I look forward to the rest of to witness the rest of that. So looking at this timeline, what thoughts do you have, and what's it been like to work with Sedaru over the years?
Well, life has been easy. Still a lot of work, but easy enough where when we need something, we can go to one location and pull that information or data. And looking at this, 2013, it just seems like we had one evolve to the next. We had a plan, or we have a plan, with phasing Sedaru into our daily operations. Phase 2 was the customer information service integration, the Tyler Incode integration. That took a bit. It was a challenge. It wasn't an easy transition, but our next phase would be our SCADA and I guess you call it our SCADA operational integration to our model. So working with Sedaru, there's a couple things I can tell you about Sedaru and the staff there. We work with Jamie. We worked with you for a long time, and a long time. And what we found that Sedaru has been really responsive in a call or a text or an email to resolve or answer questions. And that's important. When we're doing our dailies, and we get interrupted, it kind of interrupts the whole day. And especially with the application, we need it up and running so guys can continue doing what they're doing on a daily basis. There was, I'm going to tell you a story of, it was the responsiveness. We had a fire up here back in, I think 2016, and it was on a weekend. It started on a Friday. I believe it was Labor Day weekend. And the fire started up in the mountains, and it was blowing north, or let's just say in our direction. And we had to prepare ourselves for the fire crews to come in and utilize the hydrants. So we had our guys out running that area of our district, checking on hydrant conditions. So they were deployed, and the application wasn't operable. It wasn't running. It was running earlier that day, and it wasn't running. And I got a panic call from one of our field guys and says, "Sedaru's not working. We need it up and running. I don't have our paper maps. We we need to delegate our staff to head to certain locations. Quickly, I called Jamie and I called Paul Hoffman, and quickly I got a response from Paul Hoffman, and quickly I got a response from Jamie. And within, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, we were up and running. It got our guys back out there, you know, to do what they needed to do with the emergency that was on hand. And that was big. I mean, it was a weekend, man. I mean, 3-day weekend, 4-day weekend, people extend that. You're taking travels. And I don't know what you do, you know, if you have your iPad and you're out on the beach thinking, oh, I got to answer this, but you guys were quick to respond to that, which was key. And that was not the only time. And there were other times, a weekend calls when they're logging, you know, and there's only 2 guys out there logging. You guys were quick to respond. So, and the integration customization of our application works specifically for the way we operate our system. We ask, there's a wish list, we ask for something, and you guys do it for us. You accomplish whatever that is. We call it magic. I tell Cindy, they just did magic again. So we're always thinking about, you know, how do we make this application user-friendly and at the same time save us time? So it's a continual thing, you know. It started simple and it's gotten complex, but still really simple.
Yeah, thank you for that. I remember visiting not long after that fire and seeing everything all burned up, driving up the hill. It was pretty eye-opening. And I think that kind of helped a little further, like maybe the next step with trust that we kind of earned from Ernesto and the crew there. So it was definitely a big step. So if we take a look at the architecture and how Sedaru spreads across the district, George, we have the birthday cake here at the top with the 3 apps that we just kind of keyed on a little bit: Modeling, Field Force, and Omni. And then kind of in between that and our integrations at the bottom is our Sedaru Connect tool. And with Connect, you can see it's pretty active. It's able to bring in data from so many other sources, and that's the key to the one source of truth here at Phelan. And we're able to bring in data from the hydraulic model from your Wachs TM7 machine, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We have bidirectional integrations with your Tyler Incode CIS and with the 811 DigAlert most recently, and also with the GIS, which is pretty stock for a Sedaru rollout. You know, if you look at all those tools in front of you and you kind of overlay a service order system, George, I think that gives you guys an advantage in managing the water system. Any thoughts around that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's impressive to see how much we've grown. Visually, this kind of brings it all together on how we interact with Sedaru. You know, we look at expanding that in the future with other components of the application. But it seems like, you know, we start with one and we find out that, wow, you know, this is really working for us. And we bring another component in, which says, well, what else can we do? And, you know, it just progressively grows where to me, I see departments of our district kind of embrace it. This is now, to me, the center point of how we operate our district, which is kind of funny, you know, to say, because this was really just a field application. Now we brought in our customer service, our office staff into this, you know, and obviously we have the hydraulic model, which in engineering, I mean, all aspects are functioning within Sedaru. So it's an interesting way to see this visually.
Yeah, and if you kind of marry this up with the previous slide, it's been through incremental steps and it's been fairly comfortable. You know, change is usually not welcomed. It's not comfortable. And, you know, I guess maybe from my standpoint, it's been a little more comfortable, but kind of watching you guys evolve through this, it seems pretty natural. You know, you're not taking on more than you can handle at one time. you're grabbing a new initiative and tacking it on, and that's what we've been able to do. So if we start looking at how you're using, in this case specifically Omni and Field Force, so we have a couple of specific assets in play around water production. So we have assets from your GIS that are served out through Sedaru, including pumps, tanks, and wells. We have a couple of workflows listed down there where the folks in the field can collect data around their pumps and wells. We have some KPIs showcased here in the middle. So those are key performance indicators. We have those in our Omni interface, and those are queries back to the database. So we can set up these quick metrics that you guys can click on and get the answers that you need pretty quickly. So if we go ahead and take a quick peek at Omni. So here's the Phelan Piñon Hills Omni, and we can look here specifically at the water production matrix. We can see that you guys are using this on a daily basis. 146 pump logs in the last week. It's pretty solid. If we start going through and looking at the wells that are getting logged, you guys are in there and active. This data is pretty quick to get to. You can dive into a specific instance and you can look at the data that was entered. Or if you want to trend over, some time over, trend data over time, you can also dump it into a quick graph here. And then if we look at this more from the collection standpoint, we go over to Field Force. We can maybe go find a well. George, you guys recently initialized well 8 in your system, so let's go take a look at that. And here, I'm field user Paul. We'll talk more about Paul a little bit with the Tyler Incode integration, but here I'm looking as if Paul is from the field on my iPad, on my Windows Surface, on my iPhone. And as soon as I select that well, I get some pertinent information about it. This information page is showing limited data right now, but it's customizable and can show whatever we need. In this case, Paul can see, he can confirm the well name, he can see his address and his airline depth. He can also see a nice asset history. So we can see every time that somebody has entered some information about that specific feature. We can go back and we can click on that and we can see exactly what data was entered. They didn't enter the static. Here, George, we'll talk about that. Likewise, if we go ahead and start a new form, we can also enter information pretty easily. We can quickly record the time. And here, what your guys are doing out there in the field, George, is they're reading values off a panel. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So they're logging some data in here straight from the panels, and we can, we can enter a value here, but we also have validation in here. So the folks in the field, if they happen to mistype a value in here and don't catch it, Sedaru is going to help catch that. And typically a meter can't go backwards, so we just have a quick and simple validation in here that the value must be greater than or equal to the previous value. So we have this yesterday value over here, which is 1031. So we go ahead and re-enter that. It's going to accept it. And the user can just continue on down through the form and they can enter those values. You can see some calculations are happening down at the bottom. So if we add a static level and a pumping level, you're going to see our drawdown is going to update. And if we add in a production value, you can see our production goes. So I killed your GPM with that low production value there. So it's pretty simple for your guys in the field here, George, to collect that data. I'm going to jump back to our presentation here. If we look at how that's done, all the data that's coming in, this kind of forced your team to start using Sedaru every day. It's a rough way to put it, forcing them, but sometimes that's what it takes to change the mindset. And, I know you have a nice little story about this with Ernesto and team. Would you mind sharing that?
Yeah. When you punched in that value that the application didn't accept because it didn't fall into the criteria, we would call that human error. They punched that accidentally. Initially, when we rolled this out early on, we handed all the iPads to our field staff. We have probably about 8 that were using it. They were tasked to collect all the data using the application. Initially, before all this, there was a clipboard sitting at all the sites, and they would visit the site and write in the time, write in the date, and then write in the meter reads on the Edison meter reads for logging our well productions. And then they come back the next day, they do the same routine. That clipboard stayed at that site. And whenever there was a problem, or they kind of refer back to that clipboard to kind of get a gauge of how production is going. It just stayed there. But if we're at a meeting and we needed that information, we didn't have it in hand. So we had to run out there and grab the clipboard. So really that's what we were trying to accomplish, is trying to collect that data into an application. So when we started this, our operation manager, we did the training, and operation manager says, here's the application, here's a tool, use it. It's important that we do this because it's going to accomplish this. After a few months, and I say a few months, maybe 2-3 months, I kind of asked our operation manager, how's it going? And he says, oh, it's doing good. He says, okay, when we see the tables populated, when we extract the data out every month, it turns to find that we were not collecting the data like we should have. And really it became a trust issue with our field staff. They were concerned that if they inputted the data into the application and something happens, I don't know, plug got pulled or internet went out and we lost the data, that the data was lost, and they wouldn't have that information available to them anymore. So they would still continue to write those values on their clipboard. We said, no, we want you to populate the database when you visit the site. While they were doing that, they fill in the clipboard and then punch in the data. It was then when we found out that they were taking the clipboard at the end of the month, coming into the office, and then transferring that clipboard information into the application. And this is what, this defeats purpose. We're going back to paper. Not that we want to get rid of paper, but we kind of need to wean ourselves off of paper. Sedaru contacted us, said the usage was down and there was just not being used like it should have. We kind of mentioned the errors in transferring data from one to another, and there were errors in transferring that data. The pivot tables weren't working because the values were off whenever Ernesto populated the data. So we said, no, we really need to just, you go in that morning, you populate the data table in the application. Now, if you populate paper, that's fine, which they were. They finally got used to doing it because they were told to do it, unfortunately. Then after several months or even years, they trusted that the data was never lost after they populated in Sedaru. So they got it. They started weaning us off of the paper, and now referred to generated reports if they wanted to see the last month or the last couple of months or the last year. So we found that Ernesto and others, following his lead because he was supervisor then, trusted the application to do what it was supposed to do and to hold the data. retain it, because we would always download the data. We would always have it.
Yeah, and then pretty much the rest is history there. That really gave you that was your catapult spot there. It gave you guys the traction to move forward with other things.
Yeah, we knew that was going to happen, and they weren't going to be into this application. We had a couple that were ready to retire, and it's like, I got to learn something. I got to use this. I have a flip phone. Can't I just do what I do and then just retire and be done with this? They didn't want to learn it, but it was really an easy tool to use, and fun tool to use, I call it, just because of the easy use of the application.
Yeah, I've heard that 100 times in the implementations that I've done, and I always encourage our customers to pick a workflow that is going to be used often, daily and weekly, if not daily. Daily is best, because that's going to get that kind of muscle memory going and getting folks to use it. So if we look at how you started to leverage the data that Ernesto and his team were collecting, there's a lot of great data here. So, we have the well summary here on the left that allows you to kind of really drill down into a specific well. We have the monthly summary at the top here that allows you to compare, well to well. And then we got the high level production summary that allows you to see kind of overall usage by basin. I know the work that's gone into this and how they were built. I was really impressed with how your team grabbed this and ran with it. I got to help develop it along with you guys and kind of deploy it to you, but Cindy really took off with it. Was proud of her for that. What I haven't seen, George, is how you guys use it. I know how Cindy keeps it up. I know where the data comes from. How's it being leveraged? What questions are you guys answering? Who are you sharing it with?
Hey guys, do you mind if I interrupt real quick? I'm sorry, George, I didn't mean to cut you off, but we got a question that's real pertinent to what we're talking about, and I thought maybe it might make sense to address now. There's just a quick question about, was this a customized form or was this a template that already existed in Sedaru?
Good question. It was a customized form. So as George shared, they had paper forms on a clipboard, and we started with that and built those out electronically, had a little back and forth with the team, allowed them to be field tested and calibrated, and that's what they have now.
Awesome, thank you. I just thought that was timely, and we go ahead and keep going. Sorry, guys.
Yep. So George, tell us how you guys are using these reports now.
Well, we generate these monthly reports monthly. We report them to our engineering committee as well as our board. We use these to kind of monitor the degradation of some of our assets, like our wells and like our boosters. We're using this more often than we ever thought we would. Our operations manager uses them quite often. Engineering, we don't really touch it a whole lot. We do manage the data, and like you said, Cindy's just been amazing to kind of take all this information and just manhandle it. I mean, it's just too much data stuff for me to even deal with. But gosh, she's going to be retiring here pretty soon, so we're going to miss her. But we're squeezing her of all of her knowledge before she does. So we don't know what life is going to be without Cindy. Actually, Cindy, I don't know if you had mentioned, but Cindy is in the engineering department. There's a team of 2, and she's our GIS specialist and works on our data production and all of the data is collected and compiles it into reports. But this here is fairly easy to compile and create and generate. Helps out a lot. But on a day-to-day, how it's collected and visually presented on these reports, Sean and the team, they use this to make better decisions than before. It's like, well, this well's 5 years old, or 5 years before we think the life is going to run and we're going to have to replace the motor or videotape or swab or whatever. But when we look at the efficiencies, we use that more than just the age and the life expectancy of a motor or of a well or a booster. So we kind of use this in our CIP. It just changed a bit using the information that we've collected. So, and we're proactive. I mean, Sean, our operation manager, been amazing. I mean, very aggressive in doing things and getting things done. And it has a vision, and he uses this as a tool for his vision. So it's awesome. I mean, we have a great team.
Yeah, thanks for giving me a little background there. So if we move on to the distribution side, you know, we've kind of keyed in on some of the Omni and Field Force things that we've looked at here. On the distribution side, you also have pumps, hydrants, and valves in Sedaru, leveraged from your GIS, and a couple of workflows here. And the interaction is very similar to what we saw on the water production side. We have a valve exercise form in here. And we also have the Wachs integration, George. And, you know, that one I've always really enjoyed, because you basically run the TM7 valve turning machine with the Sedaru app. So that allows your user in the field could work independently if you want on his own to turn the valve. They're collecting the data just automatically, and gosh, there's got to be some time savings there for sure.
Absolutely.
So with the valves in your system and the GIS data that was collected, those were all GPS captured, correct?
They were. That was one of the first things that was done before we built the system. We had our County of San Bernardino base map that we use, state plane coordinates, and we bought a couple GPS units and we collected every single asset we have: valves, hydrants, blow-offs, air vacs, meter boxes. I mean, everything.
Yeah. So
I failed to mention, but the district is 90% all dirt roads, so a lot of that just gets buried quickly within a month, and you will find a valve. It's buried under a couple of inches of dirt. So it was important for us to know where all of our assets were.
yeah, so you have that strong spatial integrity over there with your data points. And if you kind of marry that up with the awesome data you're getting from a valve turner, you know, you're getting a number of turns to the 10th, you're getting your torque charts and your max torque and all those things. I kind of geek out on those things a little bit. If you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience here the story of the potholing on Highway 138 and how Jack kind of fell back on your data to kind of save the day there.
Yeah, so Jack was one of those employees that was looking forward to retirement real soon. So for him to embrace the application just was surprising, pleasantly surprising. We had a project, Highway 138 was being widened by Caltrans, and there was potholing of our existing utilities. Well, valves can tell you where the main line is at that location, but when the county or a prior entity would do something creative or interconnect one line to a different zone, you know, you have plans for it, but you don't know that it's really there. We had a couple of our guys out potholing in that location off of 138 and Beakley Road, out by Rick's Cafe. And they used plans, paper plans, to kind of gauge where they were at and where they needed a pothole. Well, after a couple of hours, they couldn't find it. They dug in that general area to a depth, and then out beyond that. And Jack showed up and says, so what's going on? He goes, have you guys not found it? He says, no, it's just not here. So Jack went back to his truck. Whether he pulled out his iPhone or his iPad, he used his application to walk over using Sedaru where the main line should be or could be, and asked the guys to dig in that location, which was probably about 20, 25 feet away. Guys mobilized over at the Rick's Cafe parking lot and started digging, and 4 feet deep, they found the main line. When I heard that, and the guys out that were potholing told me what had happened, they were surprised. I was more surprised because Jack used it, you know, and freaking it sold. I mean, he was sold on it. Then after doing that, he says, "Oh shoot, man, this application does work." So he used it more often than I thought he would. But he was able to kind of sell it to the guys that you have the tools, use it. I used it, and look what it did for me. So I found that the guys were using the application more so, even potholing, to locate whatever, whether it's a buried valve or a meter, or whatever that case might be, but them walking over to a pipe and saying, well, we're going to try it right here. So that was impressive. I mean, I was surprised and I was happy.
Yeah, that definitely falls back to the one source of truth again. And
yeah,
you know, kudos to Jack for jumping
yes,
on that. So kind of early into the process.
absolutely.
So I'd also like to talk a little bit about fire flow testing, and you guys have done some dynamic things there with flow tests. And you know, we have an example of form here on the slide where the user can enter in specific metrics around, you know, static residual pitot pressure, and it's going to automatically calculate, you know, our flow GPM, our flow at 20, and the gallons used. That is tracked each time a hydrant is flushed or flow tested. We can track that gallons used, and you know, you guys use that for your unaccounted for water, George. And you know, I know you guys have in the past few years have had some pretty tight constraints around conservation and having to track all those things. Maybe you could tell a little bit about how that's helped, and you know, we can talk a little bit about a fire flow testing, the dynamic fire flow testing workflows that you guys have after that.
Yeah, so back in 2016, the state of California has been in a drought crisis, and they kind of pushed forward Senate Bill 555, I believe, which is a system loss, and Assembly Bill 1608, and that was the customer side. That's conservation. Jennifer Oaks, she's our conservation specialist. She's a miss everything. She kind of handles reporting to the state and showing the state the steps we are taking to minimize that unaccountable water loss with service line replacements, you know, leaks. It's just kind of squeezing that down a bit. We used a tool to extract gallons flow from flushing. You know, it was kind of, it was difficult for us to flush when we're asking our customers to conserve. They see us flushing thousands of gallons of water when they're asked to conserve. So it was difficult for us to kind of do that secretly. So we didn't do it as often, but anytime we did flush, we would collect that water loss alongside with fire flow water loss, and as well as service leaks. And we can calculate that. We populate Sedaru with that information. You've created tiles for that in our forms. And specifically, you have some calculators that'll calculate for us. So she'll extract that data out monthly and report to the state yearly to show what that water loss is, unaccountable water loss.
Yep, and we do have some KPIs in there that'll show gallons used in a specific time period that will help support that. Now shifting to the fire flow test side, you and the team, you were able to leverage your hydraulic model in Sedaru Modeling to drastically reduce the amount of fire flow tests that you needed to do in the field. So I'm going to jump into modeling here for a moment, George, and I'm going to demo the a fire flow test on a modeling side and share a report. When I'm done with this, I'd like you to discuss the kind of that no water used flow test workflow that you guys had, where you were pretty much able to just get into the software here, run the fire flow test in Sedaru Modeling and share that with the customer. So before we recount that, I'm just going to zoom in here and grab a random node here in Sedaru Modeling. So this is a Sedaru app. It's browser based, and I just need to wait for my map for a second. So now that I have a node selected, I can go ahead and say need to meet fire flow. My original GPM here, and maybe we need 1,000 GPM. I'll go ahead and click done. Now within the app here, I can also close a pipe, change other demands. We can do a lot of things in here. For the purposes of this in time, I'll just run a quick fire flow simulation. And pretty quick here, we're able to generate that pump or that fire flow curve, that hydrant curve. And we get some nice little metrics here right off the bat. We're seeing, in big letters what the flow at 20 is, some other metrics up here around pressure. But this is the part that really, I think, helped you guys out the most, George, was being able to create a report. And I'm just going to throw this on my desktop real quick. So we'll call it a fire flow test. Go ahead and open that up. So here is that report. We have all of your contact information up here, so it's nice and official for you. Again, we're showing that curve and that information that we were displaying within the app. We have some additional data down here at the bottom to kind of show how the flow and the pressure drop as time goes by. And then a nice map to show exactly which junction we were looking at, and a map to kind of encompass that. So George, you and your team were able to calibrate your model well enough that you guys actually accepted the results in this report to satisfy any of the outside requests for a flow test. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And that was big. I mean, considering we needed to be an example to conserving water to our customers and the community. Flushing hydrants for maintenance, was necessary. We just minimized that a little bit, but the fire flow testing, I mean, customers come in, they need water service. To build, the county fire would ask, well, what's the fire flow? And they would provide that information to county fire from the CSD. Back in 2016-17, when we were going through this drought mandate, actually, operation manager came to us and says, is there a way we can utilize the fire flow test results from the application and given to a customer to hand over to the county fire? Well, it says, well, let's give that a shot. Let's see what they say. So we've done a couple of these, met with county fire, and showed them, hey, this is the results from the model from Sedaru through the application, and this is the field results. So we would have two in hand, and it validated that what we were seeing in the model was actually out in the field as well. after a few examples and then thinking about, well, could we accept this? They came back, and after meeting with their captain or whoever's in charge over at County Fire, that it was acceptable. We used this as our tool for, or the form or the report for our customers to hand over to the county. So I believe this is the first time that they've seen this and accepted a fire flow from the application or Sedaru. Now we still go out and find a location, and we'll flow it out in the field just to compare it with the results in the application. It just kind of do a calibration kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And we're still on board. So for the last 3-4 years, we've been generating the fire flow reports to our customers, and the county's been accepting those as we floated out in the field. So it was big. It was big in the county accepting technology and trusting that it's what we get out in the field with our random locations for fire flow testing to compare it with our application.
Yeah, and that's huge water savings. And if you think of the time savings, which was probably a secondary priority, we can run a fire flow here in just a couple minutes. Whereas, initializing a team to go out and do a two hydrant flow test, you got vehicles and folks involved in that, and then entering data after the fact or during either one, that's going to take up a couple hours for sure.
Yeah, it's a cost savings to our customers. They're the ones that are paying for this. So the water letters and the fire flow tests, the cost of that's gone down on them. So it helps us out.
Yes. So if we move on to the Tyler Incode integration, man, this one had a dramatic effect on your team. It really, I think it was another catapult. I talked about the steps that you guys took, but this was definitely one of the bigger ones, especially around time savings and improving data integrity. If we take a peek on the Sedaru side, I'm just going to jump into Sedaru OMNI, our office product. And if we take a peek at some of the metrics we have in around your service orders, you get a nice list of the open service orders that you have. You got 38 of them here. We can drill into those. We can delegate some of that work. I'm logged in on the field force side as Paul here, and we'll talk about him in a moment. But if Paul is away for a week or calls off, it's pretty easy for your team to get in here and delegate that work. But it's really it's really important to note that the data in here is coming directly from that service order created on the Tyler Incode side. So we have a really tight bi-directional situation here. And I'm going to jump into field force. And again, as I mentioned, logged in as Paul here. I can go look. He only has one outstanding task right now. It's a read from last week.
I think he's on vacation.
Is he?
I think so.
Gotcha. So that's the only reason it's there, because this guy's a machine, and he was key to this integration, and working with him was really good, man. His attention to detail and his technology presence is strong. So it was really a big part of the success of this project. He was able to take the time and make sure that all the I's were dotted and T's were crossed. So on the field force side here, as a field user, I can log in. I can see the outstanding work I have coming from Tyler. I can click on that read. And as I click on that, right at the top of my information page here, I have all the information specific to a work order. I can see who created it. And in fact, this time Paul created his own work. I can see when it was done and if there were any notes or other assigned to that. So if there was a question or an issue out in the field, I'd know right off the bat who I could go back and connect with to get more on that. And then if I scroll down the information page here, there's a lot of great information in here that he can look at and review before he does that read or any other work, meter service work that he's doing while he's on site. And it's important to note that not all of this data is in your GIS. This is being pulled from Tyler Incode, and kind of, again, establishing that one source of truth, and, you know, Sedaru allowing Paul in this case to have all the information in front of him and make knowledgeable decisions out in the field. So if we go ahead and hit start here, I can go ahead and peek at the service order that he is going to complete maybe after vacation here. And again, we have some service order information at the top of the form here. And then we can kind of scroll down, and the orange stuff is really the pre-populated data that the user can't change. And then the purple and gray are the things that Paul's going to end up entering in. And again, you can see we have some calculations down here. We can go ahead and put in a read, and it's just quick and easy for him to kind of get that data in there and move on. So any chance we have on the Sedaru side of pre-populating data in a form, presenting it to the user, that's going to make them more knowledgeable, and it's going to save them time that they don't have to enter a bunch of things in. So I think it's been a huge win for you guys. And Georgia, I'm curious, I'm going to go back to our presentation here. Kind of curious here how this integration changed the district. You know, if you think of Jen and the folks back at the office, or Paul, how have their days changed? I'm sure that it's a little more efficient, but, you know, what other problems did we solve as well?
Well, yeah, efficiencies. I mean, back before this, the customer service would issue a service order, and there was a lot of paper shuffling. So we eliminated a lot of that, obviously, with this application. And then populating Tyler with the paper, you know, so it took our customer service staff time, as well as our field staff time, to populate this or deal with paper. Visually, I mean, Paul's really ecstatic about this, visually seeing where his service order is spread out throughout the district. I know Jen has been involved with Paul as well, with customer service side, leaks, reads, just all that data that was collected. So they both use it daily. I mean, you couldn't pull it from them. They go to sleep with it, I bet. Imagine, because, you know, they're on call too. You know, if there's a call, they got to go respond, and they'll see this in Sedaru. So it's just been a time saver. Paul's really happy with this, and he's been really involved in the development of these forms and the Tyler integration. It's one of his, I give him all the credit. And we introduced it, and he built this with his input. So it was key. It was important.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at some of the high level stats I have on the slide here. 3,400 service orders since 2019. That's what, a year and a half. You have 6,800 connections?
6,800. I think we're at 7,000. Yeah.
So, you know, on one hand, it's interesting to easily get that number, to know how many service orders you've completed on the meter side here. But, you know, I'm sure all of those aren't discrete meters that have been touched, but, you know, looks like at least a third, maybe half of your meters have been touched just since 2019.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Pretty crazy. So moving on to the 8101 integration, this was another important step for you guys, another big time saver. So what Sedaru has built here is it's a direct integration to the 811 center, and including positive response. So on the Omni side, we can see any of the tickets that are available or unassigned. Those can be dispatched. They can also be automatically dispatched. So what that means is you can have a KPI on the Omni side where George, you or somebody on your team can decide who's going to do that specific ticket, depending on a region. Or Sedaru can automatically assign that to a group of folks, and they'll just pick it up as they do in the field. And kind of as we've seen in that theme we've seen in looking at data on the field force side, we have a nice information page. We can dig into that ticket information, and really we're parsing the actual 811 email, and we're presenting that data in an easy, digestible way, and allowing the users to go ahead and complete that work. When that work is completed, it is going back to positive response on the Newton side. So if we go ahead to, I'm going to flip back to Sedaru OMNI again on the office side. And I want to look at, oh, looks like we completed a ticket recently. Just going to back out of that for a second. So on the Omni side, we can review all the tickets that you have outstanding, ones that have been completed. It kind of gives you a really good look at kind of what's going on there. So anybody in your team can kind of look at that. Forgive me while this reloads. So right now you have kind of 18 assigned tickets out there, and we can get some good information here in our list. We got the ticket number. We know when it was assigned, and right here we're just showing all the folks that it's assigned to. In your case, George, you guys assigned to a large group, and people take it as they can. It could be, discrete users as you go through, and we continue looking at, tickets completed. So, for being a big little utility there, George, 700 tickets in a month. There's quite the volume there. Can you talk to that for a moment? And I'm going to pull up Field Force while you do that.
Well, in the past year, we've had a contractor, a couple of contractors installing fiber optic lines. So they kept us on our toe on getting these lines marked and located for them. That's why you see a high number of tickets. Unfortunately, we didn't bring this in prior to that start of work. It was kind of introduced during this flood of tickets. I think a year ago now, it was late 2019 that it was introduced to our operation manager and the team. Then we had another presentation about DigAlert and 811. And our operation manager chose not to dive into it just because of the flood of tickets that they had daily and weekly. Didn't want to interrupt that flow. As you know, tickets come in via email or faxed in, and they're distributed, printed out and distributed by hand, and that's what Sean would do. And he got that down pat. He knew to look at the location and then designate a crew to kind of handle each part of the district. But tickets don't stop. They don't stop in the morning and then read and come back, the next morning. They come in throughout the day. Sean, our operation manager, was ready for this. Tickets had slowed down and was ready for this integration. I think part of the motivation was the positive response. We needed to do something, and there were options and other options that were available, but we wanted to keep this in Sedaru. We introduced it. It took a couple of weeks to get this up and running, tested and running, and now every single field staff person says this is the best thing. They love this. Not only do they have to read, back in the day they would have to read intersection and so many hundreds of feet north and then west or whatever the directions, the delineation. The application shows them the boundary of this ticket. So they love that. Sean asked every one of our staff members, their feel of this, and they said, this is awesome. Sean loves it. He doesn't have to delegate tickets anymore.
Yep.
He's excited about this. This is one thing that he's really excited about, because it took him a good part of his morning to kind of get those out. Tickets come in during the day, and we have our field staff out in that location. It pops up on his application. He'll just run over and take care of that one instead of having to come back in the morning saying, man, I was just out there. The next day I have to run back out. So it helps save a lot of time into accomplishing these tickets. So
Yeah.
Sean embraced this. It was awesome to see that he really loved it and dug it. So I see smiles.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that heads up display is huge. You know, the workflow we had at the utility I was at was they would come through and print on a printer and take a stack of paper and go out to mark. And you know, if you were 30 minutes from home base, and sometimes you had to go back out there again after you were already there. So, but you make a good point. They don't stop. Every time a new email comes in, a new ticket's created, it's getting parsed. And you know, you can get all of that information here. You can dive into the entire ticket text, whether you're in Field Force or in Omni, and just all that data that's coming through that bi-directional relationship that we have. We're able to post any pertinent information about that ticket that the marker is going to need to know when he's out there, he or she is out there. If we go ahead and open up our form, it's a very simple form. We have made slightly more complex forms, but this is our stock form here, where we can answer a positive response, clear no conflict, or you know, we mark the area, whatever it may be. That response is going to go back to the Newton site. We're going to take a look at that in a moment. We can add any photos if we need to, and you know, just a date and a comment. So it's very simple. I'm not going to close this for sure. And then I'm just going to peek back into Omni for, so the user can also look back and look at the completed work that they have. So here we're looking at a list of active work orders. You can flip over and see any of the work that's completed. And that right there just proves that Paul is on vacation, since there's nothing there. I'm not used to that. So I want to jump to Omni just for a second, and we can grab, I want to grab a ticket number here. I'm just going to copy that ticket number, and we're going to go over to the Newton site. I'm just going to paste that in there. We'll do a quick inquiry. And there we go, Phelan Piñon Hills. Oh, your response is pending, so it does take a couple minutes. Let's get one that's slightly older. So that one was done just a few minutes ago. Take one there. So here we go, Phelan Piñon Hills. This was marked, this was actually from yesterday, but the positive response is here. And George, you can confirm that, you know, your team did this, you know, completely through Sedaru. They didn't get on the Newton site and make this entry. You know, I'm blown away by it as well, just like you are.
Yeah.
You know, this thing is just great. You know, working in a utility for a long time, and I sat literally across the hall from our 811 guy and saw him dealing with the paper all the time. Like this is just fantastic, and continues to blow me away. So George, we're coming to the end of our discussion here, and you know, I have this phrase up here, and you know, you shared with me a while back that you're kind of walking through the office there, and when you see your folks using Sedaru, it makes you happy. Can you tell us just a smidge about that?
I make sure to tell them that I'm happy to see them using that application. These are customer service representatives out in front that deal with their customers. They finally have embraced Sedaru to be one of the tools that sits residing on their screen every day. Before, it was difficult to kind of get them to use it. But now that I see that they're using it on a day-to-day basis, makes me happy. And I tell them that. I said, I'm so happy. I bring them donuts, you know, it just show them my draw that I'm so happy that they get donuts or anything like that. Not that not that they're, not that that's the enticement for using the application, but it makes me happy to see them using it, you know, and especially you see that the field staff's embraced it as well. I mean, that's big. And now that we have the younger generation coming in and they're all tech savvy, it was easy for them to use the application. And it just all around just makes us more efficient, access to data much quickly. And I mean, and for a small district like us to do something like this here, and the budget constraints that we deal with as a small district, we don't have the budgets like other entities, you know, with 100,000 connections or whatever that might be. We don't have that here. We have 6,800. To do this with our budget says a lot. I mean, this is very doable. Just have your GIS. I mean, immediately when we had a GIS of something, we deployed it out to the field. Then that GIS grew over time. So when we hear others say, did you see what Phelan Piñon Hill's done with their GIS? We are excited to show them. You know, obviously this is still growing. Our GIS is still growing. Sedaru is still growing within the CSD. We're still growing. So this is a continual relationship we have with you guys and our community, because they see the results of this. Cost savings, efficiencies, I mean, just everything comes together. So yeah, it makes me happy.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing. You know, Sedaru is definitely, you know, kind of infused in all of that the district does there. And it's really been great to be a part of that and to kind of watch it grow. Really appreciate your time and you kind of sharing the candid stories here and such. And I really look forward to the rest of the journey. So thanks again and look forward to the next project.
Absolutely, Jamie. I'll be here.
Hey, thank you guys both, right? This is fantastic. I know I've been riveted the whole time. So Jamie, George, fantastic way to share the journey. Everyone still on the webinar, you know, appreciate you guys sticking through a little bit over time here, but obviously the value of what was being presented today was clear. If there are any questions, we'd love to field those now. Again, a big thanks to George and Phelan for joining us for another utility showcase. And as always, we're interested in hearing more from you guys if you are interested. Want to show you just a little bit about where how to get in touch with us if you're interested in talking more or learning more about Sedaru and some of the projects we have going on. If you're interested in seeing a recording of this webinar or sharing it with others, it'll be on our YouTube channel, which is shown here, generally within a day or two, as well as all of our old sessions from other webinars on different topics. So please join us next time. Appreciate everyone's time today, and we look forward to talking to you all soon. Thank you again, George.
All right, thank you.